Welcome to D&I One-on-One. This is a biweekly webinar series where we talk about different topics related to culture, inclusivity, diversity, and belongingness. Today's conversation, coming out, what it means, why it isn't as clear-cut as some may think, and what are the things that we can do to support our LGBTQ colleagues. My name is Jina Etienne. I'm the creator and host of this series. I'm a CPA with 26 years career in public accounting. I shifted to DEI work about 10 years ago, and I'm bringing my lived experience in the industry to my work. Today, I'm a certified diversity executive. My work centers on something I call fearless inclusion, which I define as the freedom to be yourself and the ability to create space for others to do the same. I develop training and workshops in this space. And the goal is to create and foster more awareness and around our collective intention to be more inclusive. This series was inspired by that work because a big part of that is having the confidence to talk about DEI and all the topics that relate to it. And that starts with awareness and education. My guest today is Brian Streig. Brian has a 20+ year career in public accounting and is the tax director at Calhoun, Thomson Matza, I think I said that right, in Austin, Texas. And it's becoming a tradition for Brian to join me during Pride Month. In 2021, he shared his experiences, the nuances, the complexities and challenges of being openly gay in public accounting. Last year, he joined me to talk about Heritage Months and, in particular, Pride Month, and why it's important to celebrate them and honor them as a way to demonstrate inclusion in the workplace. And if you missed those, you can view them anytime on my YouTube channel. Brian is an avid foodie. He's constantly posting pictures of amazing dishes and cocktails. If you're not following him, check out his contact information here on Twitter. You'll see what I mean. He has a food blog, and he's a prominent member of Accountants Who Cook. That's a hashtag on Twitter. He also has a website and a community with the same name. So please welcome me in joining Brian to today's program. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, Jina, thank you very much. That makes me sound much more important than I feel like I really am. But I am doing a lot of stuff, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, it's great. And one of these days we're going to meet in person. So I do want to start by going back to an email that you sent me. It's about the ongoing challenges around understanding the perspective and lived experience of the LGBTQ+ community. You talked about how some of these conversations nationally, we're seeing them across society, we're seeing them in the workplace about identity and how it's impacting members. Before we do our first poll question, can you set up today's conversation about why these public discussions and leading to this session is important, these national conversations that feed into myths, challenges, and the risks of coming out at work?
So it is complicated coming out. When you start coming out, it happens kind of gradually with a few close friends, a few close coworkers, hopefully. But then it becomes complicated, and you forget who knows, who doesn't know. You assume somebody knows because you assume this other person you told them. Those complications happen, and then you hear things in the background, people talking about things on the news and different discussions about politics, and it can make you uncomfortable in both the location where you live and in the physical offices where you work or people that you work with. And so that's what's important to keep in mind.
It's anxiety, and pervasive, persistent anxiety is not good for one's health. Well, before we jump in deeper into the conversation, we need to do our first polling question. And I think this will be really interesting for some context for those who are joining us today. So the question is, would you characterize your organization as LGBTQ+ friendly? And while they're answering that question, can we agree, Brian, and you can tell me if this is disrespectful, for this conversation, is it okay for us to just say gay and lesbian? Or is it important to always just riddle off that acronym? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I'm a Texan, and we don't like to make any more sounds than are required to get our point across. So I think I think we can have that understanding that we are being inclusive, but there is time, and we got to, I mean, just go through
Brevity
and
is our friend here today.
yeah. When I was coming out, when I was in the 90s, gay was that term. It was
Ah,
the
yeah.
umbrella term that included everybody. And then if you remember back in the 80s, and I think this is why that kind of dichotomy stuck in my head, because they would say gay men. It
Yeah.
wasn't, it wasn't, it, so it, that kind of that language that the news were reporting on back then formed this impression that gay was everything, and you had gay men and you had lesbians and bisexual and all those other things, but that was the overarching kind of term. I think a lot of younger kids have reclaimed the word queer and would fall under that category. um, that's a whole other session, because that is a politically hot word in my community. There are a lot of people my age that is still a stinger of a word to hear and then form on your lips.
Yeah. I can understand that. And wow, the language
Getting
really
all of
has
your
changed.
results there.
Yeah, no, I see the results.
Awesome.
Half said yes, definitely, Brian. I don't know if you were watching this as well. And the the thing that I thought was, well, 15% they didn't answer. So the good news there is that we don't know. And I say that as maybe it's not good news, but I say that we probably can stop sharing the results there, Chris. I say that because only 4% said not very, and 2% said not supportive at all or friendly at all. That means they're more likely to be friendly than not friendly.
Awesome.
Over half said yes or somewhat. And so maybe this is an indication that it is a little bit safer today. You talked about the 90s. I'm not sure you're that old, but okay. And you started to talk about, and let me go ahead and put the slide up here. You started to talk about what some of those nuances and challenges are. And I know whatever you're comfortable sharing, it would be wonderful to know from your experience, what are some of these challenges?
First, it's just the interpersonal. I mean, we're all human. We want to belong. We want our coworkers to be part of our tribe at work, and you want to fit in. And so there's that initial fear of just that rejection at that level. And
Yeah.
then you have the fear of, is this going to hold me back? I mean, am I going to be looked over? Am I going to be fired because people don't want to work with me? I mean, there are all those things. I hope that's not as much of a case now as it was back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Where is it? I have a statistic. I'm trying to find it about the percentage of people. You specifically talked about career. 19% in this survey that was done, that's talked about in this article, 19% said that they aren't out at work because they worry their career will be ruined, compared to the 70% who are worried about making their colleagues uncomfortable. A lot of people are worried about whether or not they can reveal this to clients because they don't want to put the company at risk. So these career risks, they're personal, but they are also directly related to your livelihood and potentially the revenue of the company. And I think in public accounting, our relationships are one-to-one with our clients. So it's very personal.
It is, and in that regards, you have to wonder who are you assigning your staff to? If you know that they're LGBTQ, if you know that are they're an ally, are they going to stand up to a client that isn't, or vice versa? If you've got a client that isn't, then you don't want to jeopardize that relationship. I mean, there is an argument that who do you want to do business with, and make sure that they're the same type of people that you also want to employ people like that. So, that goes without saying that, kind of self-segregate that away.
It's interesting. There are a lot of assumptions that we can make about others, and sometimes silence is deafening. I was trying to remember the saying, and what I mean by that is either I'm making assumptions about you and I don't say anything, or somebody has made a statement and I stay silent because I'm making assumptions about you. And those things can be hurtful to you. They can be disrespectful to you, And you might be in a position where it isn't safe to push back. Like somebody makes a nasty comment. They don't know you're gay. They make a negative comment about somebody who's gay. And then you can't say anything if you're not out. So you just have to, what, smile and take it? Has that ever happened to you?
Of course, yes. Not recently, but yes, over the course of my career, that was not an uncommon thing. I remember the first Big Four firm I worked for, the only Big Four firm I worked for, but my first job, sitting between the tax director who knew that I was gay, and my senior who didn't, and we were out at a function, and he was talking over me to her, saying that he didn't know anybody was gay, that it was gay.
So what's interesting about that is you're now having somebody, you actually talked about this in our phone call, how you're having somebody keep your confidence. And so I wrote down a word here, pregnancy. And I don't know if this, for me, when I got pregnant the first time, I had a miscarriage, but it was like in the 4th month. It was not the moment, let's put it that way. And then I couldn't get pregnant the doctor told me I had to wait 6 months before I could get pregnant again. And then when I did, I kept it a secret. And along that entire journey, it was one of those things where people would say things to me. They meant well, but potentially it was hurtful. I'm keeping a secret. They don't know that the secret exists. And so I can't talk about what I did over the weekend. I can't talk about what books I'm reading. I can't talk, and that's pregnancy. I can't imagine having to be that way with some part of my identity that is core to who I am. And so I don't know if you can talk a little bit about if this has created stress for you at work, and it was sort of hanging over your what are you saying, hang over your head? Is that the saying? Hanging over your head in a way
Yeah.
that shut you down and stopped you from talking.
That it hasn't happened since the Big Four job, but I'm not blaming them. It was in the 90s and early 2000s, so I mean that was society back then. You didn't you just put on the mask when you went into the office. It was I grew up in the theater, and I would like just kind of tell myself that you're getting into character as you're walking up to the building and up the elevator, and you just were in character all day, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, that's exhausting. I have, and I might have mentioned this before. If not, I'm an open book. I have some social anxiety. So when I have to go out to like networking events or business events where I know nobody, I actually do the same thing. I used to stand outside and stop, before I walked in and take a breath. Okay, Jina, today you're playing the role of a confident business owner and action. And then I would walk in the room with this in my mind. I literally planted the seed in my mind walking in, and it gave me a buffer, but it didn't mean it was easy.
And you can't be as authentic.
Yeah, you're being what you think other people think you should be, right?
Exactly. And I will say that happens to me less and less. And also because I'm out more and more, and more people know. And I mean, you've got all the people here. I've go to conferences. I just spent a week in San Antonio, and it was just beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So one of the things you just mentioned, I'm looking here, this is myth number 7, coming out of work happens just once. I remember as I was doing some research for today's program, I found that one surprising, and I thought, well, when you're out, right? And as it would turn out, at least the way it's talked about in this article, you might come out to your boss, but maybe not to the rest of the organization. The organization may know, but the clients may not know. And so just because you're out doesn't mean everyone knows. Was that your experience?
Oh, it's 100%. And then it's every time you meet somebody new, or that you never actually explicitly talked about it. You're in the hall, you're at the water cooler, you're on a Zoom, Like, what do they know? I mean, yeah. Do I have
Yeah.
to hide what I, did last weekend? Is it okay to talk about where we're going on vacation? That type of stuff.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I just got this glimpse of, I'm actually scanning like your background. And one of the things I was thinking is if somebody wasn't out and we're immediately going to Zoom and you haven't given any thought to what's back there, I can't imagine if somebody was outed and didn't even know they were outed because they didn't realize that we're seeing into your home. And uh, I hope that didn't happen to somebody, but I'm pretty sure um, that might have happened to somebody. And other things that are similar to that, that some part of us has been revealed, that we were able to hide at work and we can't hide anymore in this virtual world.
I'm pretty sure that happened, especially when everybody went home and started Zooming immediately and were throwing together a workstation on their kitchen table.
Yep. Didn't know how to use blur your background, which by the way is not available in GoToWebinar. Y'all need to catch up. Can I just say, I'm always having to fix what's back here and remember where's my junk. So it's really interesting. When we think about coming out, I will tell you for me, I just thought it was one of those things where you tell everybody that you're gay, and now I have permission to talk about the fact that you are gay as well. And is that not a safe assumption to make?
I don't think so. I mean, for me, pretty much yes, but I know for other people, no. Or it's conditional, kind of like when you were starting to tell people you were pregnant, and even before you told everybody, there were people you told because they needed to know, you wanted them to know, you were close to them,
Yeah. Their
and
support was helpful.
yeah.
But I've
So
also been in situations where I've done that and then people didn't know it was a secret. And then they create an awkward situation.
I
So
would say, especially for the LGBTQ community, if you don't know, then assume it's been told you in confidence.
that's actually, I think, a safe thing when we talk about diversity in general, because there are so many dimensions of diversity within us. Way more is invisible than is visible. Too often when we talk about D&I, and I ask this question all the time. When you hear diversity and inclusion, what's the first thing that pops into your head? And everybody says race. Almost everybody says race. And then if you dig a little deeper, it's usually black and white. And so as a result of that, I'm like, what was the point I was making now? It's completely gone. What was I talking about? What were we talking about?
Well, just the different types of diversity,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's not just race. It's not just a male versus female type
Yeah.
gender issue.
And I think the point I was trying to make is that there's so much of us that people can't see. And so in some ways, we get to choose who gets to know what about us. And so best to say or assume that if somebody's sharing something with you, don't assume it's public. I think that's what your recommendation is. By the way, somebody put in the Q&A that that's why we sanitize our homes, just in case. And that's also true for socioeconomic background differences, perceptions of wealth and poverty. There are all kinds of things that are given away in our homes. So listen, before we go any further, I want to go ahead and move to our second polling question so we can kind of pace them throughout the program. And I'm really curious to see what folks say about this one. What percentage of LGBTQ plus candidates research prospective employers for LGBTQ plus inclusivity? I actually have a specific stat, so I'm curious what people say. What is your guess, Brian? Did I tell you the answer to this question?
No, my guess is gonna be B, the 87%. And
Oh,
I think
funny you
that,
said B, and I'm looking at my slide. I'm like, there's no B here. So
yeah, I'm
you
looking
get
at the poll. I think it's 87%. I think that the 13% that aren't in the 87% are special circumstance cases that already know that they don't have to.
You are such an accountant. You just said the 13% that aren't in the 87%. And I'm like, what on earth? And then I know everybody here understands what that means. So anyway, all right. So
CPA
where
talk,
are we in
guys.
the results?
Understood. I would close this poll down, folks. Closing down poll 2 of 4 in 3, 2, and 1. Closing and sharing as well. Here you go, Jina. The attendees are coming in at 36%, are saying 87%. So back to you guys.
Yeah, 36% agree with you, Brian.
All right.
And I'm surprised 21% said everyone. So what does the data tell us? Well, let me look at my notes. The research says here that 87% who identify say they research their company before they even apply. And what they're trying to do is get a sense of LGBTQ inclusivity. 71% say they check social media. 61% say they speak to or reached out to talk with a current or a former employee. 45% say they checked the employee health benefits because that might be an indication. 30% said they researched company leadership. So this means, all of the things that they're posting on social, the things that are the things that they know that are publicly available could be blogs that are written in articles, etc. And then 24% said they checked the company's profile or mission to ensure that their values aligned. And what's really interesting about that is that means those visions and values, et cetera, on the websites are important. People actually are looking at that for different reasons than we might think.
I completely agree. And even if it's not explicitly stating, you're looking at maybe the mix of genders, the mix of ethnicities, and make a general assumption that if you are inclusive of different ethnicities and a nice mix of men and women, that's going to bleed over into be the other elements of D&I kind of issues.
Yeah. Somebody had a very interesting question. She's interested in knowing your thoughts on allies wearing rainbows or similar indications. Is it supportive or meaningless? And there's always, for me, this concern of appropriation. We hear about a lot in cultural appropriation, but is there a risk of that when you're trying to be an ally for the LGBTQ plus community?
It is 100% appreciated and supported. I think, my personal opinion, it tells someone who is not out that that's a safe person. They may need someone to talk to and not have anybody else. I mean, it could, they don't have a family member that they can talk to. It could just mean that they can let their guard down when they walk in your office and take that breather. So, I mean, yeah, it's meaningful.
So I know an organization where they have, and I don't remember if they're little stickers, and this was back in the day when everyone was in the office, but I think they either had little placards or something that you could put on your desk to indicate that you were a safe person. Because the person who got one of those agreed to be an ally, has some awareness and understanding, and is a safe place to go when you don't feel safe. So if somebody worked in an organization, and these are bigger companies, this was a bigger company, but if it doesn't mean smaller companies can't do it. It's an interesting idea, but it says, even if I don't know you, if I just need a place where I can feel safe because something just happened, I have a place I can go to be safe and talk about it. And I think just so a tip out there, because I really appreciated that idea.
Well, and I will say, even if somebody is gay or lesbian and somewhere in the LGBT community and they don't come out to you and you are an ally and you're waving that flag, don't think it's not respected and supportive. You're giving them cover. I mean, you're kind of like on the front line.
Yeah. So you say you're giving them cover, and it got me to thinking about how I have to keep your secret, but in a way, not in a bad way, but in the sense that I can do a number of things, and you can tell me if what I'm describing isn't helpful. One of the things I'm thinking I can do as an ally, actually, let me put this slide up here because we have a couple of suggestions, things for people to think about. One of the things that I can do is, where is it? There it is. I can deflect. So if somebody makes a comment, I can redirect the conversation. Wow, that's interesting because it got me thinking about, and I changed the conversation.
No, that's totally true. I've had a few instances at work where a coworker would redirect when we were talking maybe about weekend plans or
Mm.
movies we were watching. It was getting to that, and you could tell it was building up, and it was like kind of in the flow of conversation. It was going to be my turn to talk, and they would step in and like bring it somewhere else.
Early in my career, I felt uncomfortable going to happy hour. And at the time, it felt like a stupid reason. But the reason I felt uncomfortable was because we were going to the bar downstairs, like right there on the corner where the building was. And the music that they played wasn't music I was familiar with. And the first couple of times I went and there were these conversations, oh, you remember this song? And like I immediately couldn't say anything. I was freezing like the deer in the headlights. And so I got uncomfortable and I didn't want to reveal anything about myself. So I stopped going. And it feels like a silly idea, but I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about, that you're in this situation, everybody's making comments about something that if you don't say something, it's almost like you are saying you're like them.
Right.
And now you're almost lying by omission about yourself, which gets, did you say this earlier, like, or did I hear this in the previous conversation? Now I got to remember, who did I say what to and when, in what context, so I can know? I'm already tired thinking about that.
Yeah. No. I mean, if you're not completely out and not afraid, like I try not to like throw it in someone's face that every time I meet them, but I will make sure that I drop husband and or something to just to indicate that so that they know, and I don't have to worry about whether they know or not. If they don't like it, they can turn around and walk off, hang up on me, cancel the Zoom, whatever, but at least I'm putting that out there and I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, so we're talking about all of this in the context of LGBTQ plus outness in the workplace. But I think for everyone listening, I'd invite you to think about something about you that all of your colleagues don't know and that you'd prefer to keep private. It could be anything. And if you take that and extend it to something really important about you that your colleagues don't know, that, there's a stigma associated in some cases still in this country with being gay. It's even worse for those who are trans in this country today. All of the advocacy and the awareness and the education and the work that's been done to support the LGBTQ community is really just the L and the G. And we are starting to see that, the data tells us it hasn't cascaded and carried over to the other letters of that acronym.
Right.
I'm not saying this to make this political. This is a question of understanding and awareness and comfort talking about it. Gender literacy is a thing. And being able to talk about this stuff takes vernacular. And so what I'm hoping, I said at the beginning, one of the things that inspired the series for me is just creating a space where you get to listen. This isn't a training where you're in the session and I'm having you sit in a group, a group activity. You get just listen and hopefully pick up a thing or two. That's the goal.
Well, I'm going to just throw out that I know I'm privileged in a sense. I've built a bubble around me. We were talking about that on the drive up from San Antonio. We're in an inclusive bubble. I just spent a week with people in San Antonio and I didn't have to worry. And when we went dancing last night at to celebrate the end of the summit, I was probably the only gay person in that bar. And the music that was playing, it's not my kind of music, but I had fun. They dragged me out on the dance floor, and even though I moved like a stiff old white guy, I still tried to hold my, keep moving and have fun. And it takes a long time to build that community and surround yourself with people that will accept you, regardless of what your difference is. But it's one of the few times you can get around this these groups and just be yourself, and that's not always in the back of your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I've been popping around some of the different slides. You know, everyone has the PowerPoint presentation. Download it if you don't, because we're not going to touch on all of these slides. But I wanted to put some of these up because we've talked about some of this stuff, but I didn't bring up the slide. And what you were just talking about, I wanted to pull this up because what you're experiencing there is this almost second to the bottom, like sub-bullet, experiencing non-inclusive behaviors at work. What you were experiencing, and everyone should know, that was actually a professional event that you were at. You weren't there for social reasons, and that is the beauty of inclusivity, is when none of this matters. It's not about saying, "Oh, I'm okay that you're gay." You don't have to say anything at all because it doesn't matter. And that's like the epitome of inclusion. My race doesn't matter. My gender doesn't matter. The fact that I have a visible disability, nobody bats an eye. And we just keep, we just roll with it. That's inclusion.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, a lot of people don't experience that at work for a number of different dimensions of diversity.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to share this one slide here as well. Where is it? This one. Because this is where it gets more complicated, and you touched on this earlier. The minute you start to have an intersection of multiple things. So let's say I have a disability as a Black woman who's gay or lesbian. I know some women use gay, and they don't necessarily use the word lesbian. And that makes me fall into multiple groups. That intersection creates added complexity and added nuance. And I just wanted to put this up there because very few people are just one thing.
That's so true. Yeah, everybody has some type of intersectional identity that can make them self-conscious under the right set of circumstances.
And uncomfortable under the wrong set of circumstances.
Yeah.
The challenge here then is, how do I know what's okay to ask, what's okay to say? I was doing a session yesterday with a client, or earlier this week with a client, and we had them do a breakout activity where they were given a combination of an event and in this case, it was a type of neurodiversity, and they had to find a way to support that person at that event. And the first question that came up when we did the debrief was, well, how will I know? And you can, and there are behaviors and indicators that people assume effeminate behavior by a man means he's gay. That's not true.
Correct.
So how does somebody know? And if they wanted to ask you, is there a safe way to do that without being offensive?
No. I mean, even we play the radar game and try to judge by, I mean, just body language and, kicking the tires with different phrases. I mean, there are times it's just hard to know. Because, I mean, the worst, you don't want to, like, I don't have the right words.
So if I come and ask you, so maybe the way to approach it is the way you approach a lot of uncomfortable conversations, which is I preamble my question by saying, I'm probably going to open my mouth and insert my foot here. And I don't mean to be offensive, but I wanted to talk to you about blank. Is that okay? Or I have a question and I thought you might be able to answer it for me. And the question I have has to do with the, gay community. And so clearly I'm coming to you because I think you're gay. I don't know you're gay. And maybe that's a way for me to, well, I'm asking now indirectly.
Yeah, no, I think that could work. Specifically about the gay community might be a little strong depending on how well you already know that person.
I was just trying to come up with an example of how you can stumble your way
But
through
yes,
the conversation.
you
And
definitely can and should. I mean, there are some people who are not part of the LGBTQ community that will be very offended if you suspect that they are, for
that's
whatever,
fair.
for their own internal reasons. And I'm not going to judge them for that because that's their own internal reasons
And that's fair.
and background. Yeah.
None of us want to be labeled something or assumed to be something that we're not. So part of the reason, let me actually put this polling question up there. We're going to go to the third polling question. I think it ties into this because perhaps, and maybe there's an assumption that as we start to become more familiar with pronouns and people who are using she, her, him, they suggests a cisgender identity, which may not be the case. And then people who are using them, they suggests that they're either transgender or possibly, gay or lesbian. We know that's not true. So I just was curious. That's why I wanted to put this question in here. And then after this, there's a lot of stuff in the Q&A. I'd like to just start maybe walking through some of those if we can.
Yeah, I want to talk about this one before, I mean, after you finish your polling question, but before it wrap today, I think this one is an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm seeing the results coming in. Are you looking at can you see the polling results on your side?
I can't see that. I just see the actual quick poll.
Okay, well, Chris will publish the results after when it's done, which is probably now.
Absolutely, folks. We'll close down poll 3 in 3, 2, and 1, closing out poll 3 and sharing results here. So you kind of have an interesting split here. You have 34% saying it is openly encouraged, followed by 36% saying it isn't clear one way or the other, with 25% saying support is implied, support but not actively encouraged. So back over to you guys.
So the good thing here is only 3% are saying it's not allowed. And only 3%, oh wait, yeah, that's 3%. And only 3% are saying, I mean, technically it's allowed, but they really don't want you to do it. So it's a third, a third, a third. Either it's encouraged, not actively encouraged, but allowed, or they're not really sure. So you wanted to share some thoughts on this?
Well, so it's almost like waving the rainbow flag at the end of your name in a sense. And I can see an argument for a business owner to say actively discourage it, to protect the people who are in the closet and don't want that to be brought up and talked about. So I can see that, but I can also see that in a sense, I started doing it after our first video. I figured, but by then it's like it's
You mean back in 2021?
Yeah, if somebody looks me up, they're gonna find it. So I mean, like, I'm not hiding anything. So let me put it up there. I did kind of feel like it was like, wait, is this person saying that they're gay or that they're supportive or and LGBTQ? But I felt like it was important whether you are or not, but it's almost like saying that I'm a safe person to respect who you are.
Yeah. I wonder if, because I've worked with some organizations that aren't comfortable and they actively say, don't do it, just so that it doesn't show up on a couple emails and not on others and that kind of thing. And I wonder if there's a risk of feeling politicized as an organization, because if you do it, either you're sending a message that some might see as a subtle but clear way of saying I support the LGBT plus community, which therefore is political. It's the opposite of what you just said. I don't know if you thought, I mean, I just thought of that when you were making that comment about not doing it could be to protect some people.
It could protect, it could. So if somebody's not comfortable putting it on for whatever reason, if you are encouraging it, and am I cutting out?
Yeah, it's kind of, I can hear you, but it's your video.
Yeah, I think our internet is of course starting to act up. It's probably too hot outside for the internet or something. Um, I think you can use it to protect people. You don't want to send an implication that if somebody doesn't have it, that they are against D&I initiatives.
That's fair. That's fair. And we're starting to see it more and more. For example, I know on LinkedIn, you can go into your profile somewhere, I don't remember where, and you can put your pronouns there as opposed to having to add it to the actual name field, which I know some people do. I don't remember where, but I've started to see that in a couple of places, either in software or on social profiles, which I thought was interesting.
I know people that don't think it's appropriate for work. I mean, they're not against it. They support. They're an ally. They just don't think that that's a part of it. And I can totally 100% respect that point of view.
Mm-hmm. There's a comment in here that says, I don't think you should ask personal questions like that in the workplace. And that's absolutely fair. And, you know, I think you said this earlier, when in doubt, don't ask and don't assume. Just asking. So the other one person here, isn't that the same as asking a woman if she's pregnant? Yeah, don't do that. Asking the question already suggests what I believe to be true. So asking the question can be just as hurtful. Best to not ask. If somebody trusts you enough and feels that they want to share something with you, they'll share with you, right?
Yeah, and you can send signals. You can talk about other people in your life that are in the LGBT community so that they know that that's it. I mean, and you can do that intentionally to send that signal.
That's
to
fair.
Make sure that they know that you are somebody.
All right, so my sarcastic self, I'm gonna get in trouble for this maybe, but my sarcastic self, you said you were in theater, and I'm like, does watching certain plays or driving certain models of cars tell people I'm just being sarcastic? Because there are these stereotypes out there. So we have to be careful about what we throw out there because you don't want people to get the wrong impression. So
Right.
I'm just sharing it. All right, let me see what's here in the questions because there are quite a few comments that came in. Do you foresee a future where these kinds of issues are no longer a leading issue for these diverse groups, particularly LGBTQ+? How hopeful are you, Brian?
I'm hopeful that it is not a career-ending thing. I'm hoping that but we're humans, and humans, like, this has evolved, this has ebbed and flowed over the eons. So I'm hopeful that it will be better. That it's never going to be perfect in our eyes.
Yeah. So you see a future. We just don't know when.
Right.
Are you hopeful that it'll happen during your career? I'm adding to the question now.
No, I mean, it has in my career. I mean, look where I'm at now.
But what about generally, broadly? Because you did say you feel privileged and lucky that you're in a bubble, but do you see?
That's my hope, is that doing these events helps make somebody else's reality closer to this.
Yeah, that's fair. I do feel like sometimes, and one of the reasons I'm an open book is because I feel like sometimes I can say things that other people can't say, and simply saying it validates somebody, even if you'll never know that you did something that helped that person. So I appreciate you doing that for this. Somebody made a comment here that another reason for hiding their LGBTQ+ identity, for not coming out, is possible medical status. For example, HIV. And that's one of the things that in that article they talked about, why people look at their prospective employers. Health insurance benefits can be a big indication. You know, whether or not you have to be married to get health insurance, whether or not gender affirming care is covered through health insurance. So that kind of thing.
And those type of issues, yeah.
Oh, that was not for me. That's a technical question. All right. Some of these are really long. Hold on. Somebody says their company uses stickers and pins to be worn and placed on laptops. Thank you for sharing that. I'm assuming that means to show support, to show allyship, she didn't put this in here, maybe to send the signal that you are a safe person. Either way, I love that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. At Grant, I know we had pins that had the rainbow insignia on them, and I think we used them to celebrate Pride events when we were during Pride Month. It wasn't something that people wore all the time. Somebody said before working in D&I role, they heard the words and instantly thought diversity and inclusion. They instantly thought of the protected groups, and I think gender identity is part of the groups that are the groups that are protected by like the Civil Rights Act, but there are a lot of more identities that are not. So
Yeah, I think that the gender identity, it's in a scale that goes from dark to black, and you're just talking about there's a lot of grayness right in the center. That is it part of like the LGBTQ type issues and not just man versus woman. I mean, there are so many things that's such a complicated concept.
Yeah, so you just used black and white, but I don't think you meant that in terms of race. I think what you meant, just so that I can clarify, right? You meant that in terms of we live in a binary society, and by binary, you're either male or you're female. And what we know is actually true anatomically and medically is it's a spectrum. There is a spectrum. I mean, every woman has some testosterone and every man has some estrogen. That's everybody knows that. So there's your teeny weeniest little indicator. But humans are actually born. One of the reasons on our birth certificates we are assigned male or female is because when you're born, the doctor looks at your genitalia and assigns you male or female on your birth certificate. But sometimes they can't tell. It's called intersex. And so you're right, there's an absolute spectrum here. And when you talk about the protections under things like the Civil Rights Act, it's not always clear who is covered in those groups. So just expanding on that a little bit here. All right, what's the next one? Oh, this is more of a comment, and I don't know exactly when it came in, but the comment is, especially in these trying times, we need visuals of allies wearing rainbow clothing. Okay, I think that was around how do you transmit to somebody, send the signal that you're safe?
Yeah.
Is there something else they could do? So you said maybe I talk about something or talk about someone close to my life. Is there another thing you remember somebody doing that helped you know this person is friendly and safe? If you think of it, let us know.
Yeah, let me think. But I mean, that's the most common way, just to let me know that like you're either you're just saying it, or maybe you're just it's your way of saying that, hey, if you want to talk about it, here I am. I know. I remember the very first time it was 100% clear, and I froze up and didn't take the bait. So don't be upset if that. I mean, I still have that visual in my head all the time of like he was trying to be like do this, and I got too scared and backed out.
That's really interesting. So we're putting in this effort to help you know that it's safe, and you still might have some underlying fears and anxieties. And it's interesting that you say that, because in my mind, if I said I'm safe and you know I'm safe and I've created the space for you to say something and you don't, I guess I never really thought that you wouldn't. And my immediate thought would be, it'd be like, oh, thank goodness I can say something. And then it just happens naturally. But again, this is complicated. It's different for everybody. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Most of these other things are just comments. Like somebody's asking, why isn't age discrimination part of our discussion? Ageism is very real, and I'd love to actually have a conversation about that in a future episode. I think
I'm just young and I can't address that.
Well, haha, but I think part of this might be intersectionality, because I was reading in one of these articles, they were talking about coming out at work, the implications of coming out at work. They change as you get older. And for people who felt, actually in 2 weeks, joining me is going to be Drew All He's transgender, and I may as well just put this up here now in case anybody's interested. Registration is already open. If you want to scan that QR code, you can register. He's going to be joining me to talk about gender identity and how sometimes when we're young, we don't own and accept our identity, and there's a story that tells us there's something wrong with us. And as you get older, you get to be more comfortable. And then you get older and you're more confident talking about it. And then you have, until you're older, you're comfortable coming out. And so maybe age does play a role here. I mean, did you notice your comfort and confidence level change as you got older?
It does. You have more life experience. You can better anticipate someone's reaction. You can better just not care what their reaction is. I mean, you kind of get to that point that it doesn't matter what their reaction is because I'm me and I've kind of grown into my skin.
That's easy to say and hard to do because, you know, anytime somebody talks about something personal, maybe that is just something that comes with age. By the way, you're going to like this one. They don't have a question. They're just saying Brian is awesome. That's all. Somebody asked a question. How much time do we have? Okay, we have a few minutes. Somebody asked the question, do you find political issues that are directly involved with the LGBTQ initiatives cause a new stressor for conversations and debates around the so-called water cooler? So are you experiencing that?
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, I'm in a hot spot where a lot of these issues are coming up in the press all the time. If the goal is to run people out of areas, then it's working. You know, if you don't think that your LGBTQ friends or employees or clients aren't considering relocating from bad to better, I think that would be a naive assumption.
Yeah. You know, you made me think about this from the client perspective. I hadn't really thought about clients coming out to us as the service providers. What's interesting about our profession, especially those of us in public accounting, I used to be, this is very, very private and intimate as a business. We know some things about our clients that nobody would know publicly. So talk about a confidence that we have to be able to keep. And it doesn't matter your political beliefs. It doesn't matter your awareness and understanding. You still have to be respectful. Although you did say earlier, it's a choice of who we work with. And I don't know if this is happening, but I can imagine there might be some organizations that as their clients are coming out, are deciding to no longer work with that client. That would be unfortunate, but I'm guessing it's probably happening.
Well, let me just say that, you know, I just got back from this summit thing in San Antonio, and one of the presenters is someone that I've just loved and fanboyed over for years and was there and actually got to meet and talk with. But in her presentation, one of the things was a client's perspective, like surveys of clients of accountants, and they say that the accountant knows everything. And their example was one person explaining why they left was because the accountant was judgmental of them.
Oh, wow.
So they didn't say like on what the issue was, but they just knew that the accountant knew all of their dirty laundry and all of their business, and they didn't jive with that accountant's point of view, so they went and found somebody else.
So these connections really do matter because we do make those we build those relationships. So I've had us start this fourth poll to close us out. We can maybe make a couple more comments before we have to hand this back to Chris. Somebody said, how do you combat those who seem to look for reasons to feel offended? Well, that's a hard one. We don't have time for that one, but that's a good question because some people just seem to be prone to be offended. And so I guess if you sense them, do you just, what is that? You just chose not to say anything even a little bit?
Yeah. I mean,
a little bit triggering to somebody, just stay quiet?
Yeah. I mean, and let's face it, we all have friends. You're part of minority groups. I'm part of minority groups. We all have friends that are a lot easier to antagonize and like rally up, and you just got to either take it with a grain of salt or find new friends, or, you know, just I mean, you either get that or you don't.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I also sometimes I don't know that we know that we're going to be triggering to somebody. Part of this is the think about your experience with the person. You have a sense if you've worked with somebody before and you've heard somebody say something that triggered them, that will help you know how much to not say. What a weird way to phrase that sentence.
Even
Well,
if you,
we are sort of at
oh,
the end, so I'm going to let you have the last word because we have like 2 minutes left before Chris is going to kick us out.
all I can say is thank you so much for having me. I enjoy these talks. I mean, it, it is, uh, it takes a while to get comfortable being this uncomfortable and vulnerable, and it's still a progress. But like I told the people this morning, I like somebody has to stand up and talk, and I can do that. And luckily, I'm in a place that I can, so that's why I'm here.
So thank you all for joining us today. I hope this has been a helpful conversation to the 37% on the poll that said they learned something new. That's why we're here.
Mhm.